Hey there, welcome back to Practical Stoicism, except it is Sunday, so we're going to do another segment of Practical Cynicism. Now, the feedback from last week's first run of this was overwhelmingly great. 97% of you said that you enjoyed Eric's presence, you enjoyed his content, and you thought that this would be an ongoing benefit. So whether or not practical cynicism will remain a regular staple is still yet to be seen. You can weigh in on the survey of whether or not it should be using the link in the show notes of this episode. But I think for the time being, people are getting a lot out of it, and so I'm going to keep doing it. Eric's going to keep doing it for a few weeks. What I think I would like to do in the long term is use these as a setting for me and Eric to sit down together, even though he's in Florida and I'm in Colorado, virtually together, and talk, discuss these differences, these finer points, some of the history of Stoicism, which necessarily includes cynicism. I think that those conversations could be very enlightening for me, for Eric, and for all of you. I don't know when we'll start that, and whether or not it will take over these segments or be an additional segment on a different day of the week, but it is in my mind, and if you fill out the survey linked in the show notes, be sure in that third question where you get to add additional thoughts to weigh in on that part too. Let us know how you feel about what we're thinking about doing. Also, I hope you're enjoying the daily content. I am really trying hard to hit that goal every day. Those writing goals can be challenging sometimes. We had a couple of short episodes last week. We'll have a couple of short episodes this week, but I think they'll only get longer and longer more consistently as I repeatedly flex that writing muscle and really settle into creating daily content. It is a challenge, but it's a challenge I want to rise to meet. And Eric is helping me do that by filling in one of the days, and possibly two of them, if that's the decision we make and the direction we decide to go in. Anyway, here is your weekly dose of cynicism with Eric DeMott.
Hello, and welcome to Practical Cynicism. My name is Eric DeMott, and on this episode, I have a bone to pick. Well, I don't actually have a bone, and it's not exactly clear to me if the bone is the object of the picking or if the bone is the pick and I'll be using it to pick at something else. It's not really clear, but it doesn't need to be because it's a metaphor, and it's loaded with meaning beyond the sum of each word. You knew that this phrase means that I'm upset. We're about to talk about what's upsetting me, something that I've been ruminating about for a while, and that this conversation might take a minute. It's really a wonderful thing that we have stock phrases and idioms like this. It allows us to communicate so much information and context and emotion in such a small package. It saves us so much time, too. I can just say, I have a bone to pick, and not unpack all this subtext. I could have saved us this whole minute, but adversity makes us stronger, and I'm trying to make a point. We are actually inundated with language like this all day long, and very rarely do we actually need to stop and think about what we are hearing. Everything is so straightforward. But life wasn't always like this. In the ancient Mediterranean, on the island of Delphi, there was an oracle who basically refused to speak to anyone in plain English. She only answered in riddles, and since she was speaking on behalf of the gods, you wouldn't dare ask her anything but the most important of questions. So there you are, standing in the temple, pleading to the heavens, only to receive an ancient Greek fortune cookie to decipher. And these were difficult to decipher, and when the meaning was mistranslated, it often led one to ruin. It's easy in our modern times to dismiss this sort of story about dead religious traditions as relics of humanity's ignorant, primitive past, but I implore you not to dismiss this out of hand, because this is ancient Greece we're talking about, and they were definitely not ignorant nor primitive. They invented philosophy, empiricism, democracy, and spanakopita. And the philosophers of the time took the oracle's words seriously. The oracle delivered statements to Socrates, Diogenes, and Zeno, and those statements were critical moments in their philosophical evolutions. The oracle stated that no man is wiser than Socrates, which led him to his definition of wisdom as knowing what he doesn't know. Zeno asked the oracle what he should do with his life and was told, "Take on the color of the dead," which he translated as that he should become a scholar and become pale from long hours reading books and studying philosophy. Diogenes was told that he needed to deface the values, which put him in a tricky spot because he worked at the city's mint making coins for the city of Sinope. So he took his chisel and got to work, destroying as many coins as he could until he was exiled, captured, sold into slavery, and eventually made his way to Athens, where he then realized that the oracle was being metaphorical and meant to deface the cultural and political values of the time. Easy mistake, anyone could have made it. The ancient Greeks loved these compressed little bits of wisdom and have a rich tradition of maxims, sayings, and anecdotes. Perhaps the shortest and most famous maxim of the oracle was "Nothi seauton," know thyself. This phrase was inscribed on the temple, and no one entering would have missed it. Before entering and speaking to the messenger of the gods, you were commanded to evaluate yourself. And it is a command, like the 10 Commandments are commandments. This isn't a law or a principle or suggestion. Grammatically, this is called an imperative. It's the form a verb takes when someone is telling someone else what to do. Know yourself, your limits, your place in the universe, your past, and your future. And that is a lot to know. You are a lot to unpack. And if you've mistaken yourself, Gods be with you. Know thyself was Apollo saying, I did not ask you to come here. I do not lightly welcome you into my house. You have nothing to offer me but smoke and praise in exchange for my favor. And my favor and my wrath has brought many like you to ruin. Please do check yourself before you wreck yourself. Apollo doesn't mess around. Before Yahweh narrowed it down to just the Big Ten, there were, or are, 146 other Delphic maxims. And all of those are also commandments. There's classic stuff like honor your parents, help your friends, educate your children, but there are also some maxims that need a little more thought to understand. For example, keep the holy silence, or do not use an oath, keep secrets secret. And as we have seen, even if we work to determine all of the subtext of these commandments, there's always the risk that we have made an error and we'll have to reevaluate again and again as circumstances change. At this point, we have talked enough about unpacking the meaning that has been locked away in our common expressions and the dangers therein. But there's too much meaning built into these concepts, and unpacking them creates more things to unpack. Since we are finite beings, we must at some point also repack and move on. After we revisit and reinterpret and extract some value from these changing bits of wisdom, we must put them back together in some new fashion and move forward. Now, it turns out that having a bone to pick comes from the idea that a dog will spend a lot of time chewing on a bone and picking it clean. And since anything related to dogs is primed for segues about cynicism, allow me to channel the spirit of Diogenes and sink my teeth into you. Finally, we come to our cynic lesson of the day. Last time we learned that our mugs might be preventing us from being wise and virtuous. Today we learned that knowledge itself is a kind of baggage. It's not enough to know about cynicism, or stoicism for that matter. That is merely knowledge, facts and figures and dates. We really must embody stoic know-how and do our stoicism. Performing philosophy in the streets was a hallmark of cynic philosophers, and it is the reason I'll have so many great stories to share with you about their insane antics over the course of the series. But stoicism does demand more from you than meditation, introspection, and commitment. It asks you to do the work. Cynicism and Stoicism have this in common. Modern Stoicism in particular shares this with ancient Cynicism, since the physics and logic of ancient Stoicism has been jettisoned, and all that remain are the very practical and practicable exercises that we should be performing, because our actions are what are virtuous. Knowledge of courage, temperance, wisdom, and justice do not make anyone virtuous. The goal is not to know what is virtuous, but to be virtuous, and that requires action on all of our parts. Like many of you, I like to learn and obtain new skills, some that I'll never need or use. One of my degrees is in art history, and as much as I enjoyed and obsessed over the classes, professors, and art that I studied, the only time I get to flex my art history muscles is trivia night. As you can imagine, this is bittersweet because it is a night dedicated to things that are trivial, like my art history degree. So I put it to you thusly. Both you and I have a shared burden. We are students of wisdom, and we are pressed by both the Stoics and the Cynics to exercise our virtue and strengthen ourselves in word and in deed. For the Stoics, this means doing the hard work of actually unpacking the commands of memento mori, amor fati, and the others you either know of or will soon learn. For the Cynics, this means deface the values. And all of these call back to the Delphic know thyself, the sacred, perennial call to evaluate yourself and your world. Evaluate as in determine and test the value. If you're a Stoic or a Cynic, you'll know that virtue is the only good, the only thing of value. But that is just a proposition, a philosophical fun fact, unless we embody that wisdom and live it in our everyday lives. This is how, instead of unpacking meaning, we pack the meaning into our lives, our words, and our actions. Thank you again for your time today. After my last episode, so many of you offered feedback, praise, and encouragement, and I can't thank you all enough for the kind words. They are both appreciated and inspiring. I hope in this episode that my words and thoughts provided you something valuable, whether it was new or simply a reminder, and encouraged you to make the most of your day and your life as you have encouraged me. I will continue to read all of the feedback you can send me, so please reach out however you can. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Practical Stoicism. I appreciate you being here. If you haven't yet subscribed to this show, hit subscribe or follow or whatever the button says in the app you're listening so that you get new episodes the minute they come out. Also, if you've not reviewed the show, I would appreciate you doing so. You can review it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or at podchaser.com. Thank you again for listening today, and until next time, take care.